Hello, my name is Bubbs, I'm an artist, and I like to hear myself talk, and one of my favorite things to hear myself talk about is my old OCs. I have been writing, creating, drawing these stories, these worlds, these characters, pretty much for the entirety of the life that I remember having and living. So I have a lot of characters. I wrote a lot of things, and while plenty of them stayed with me all the way till adulthood, others have kind of gone by the wayside, and I haven't really taken a look at them in a while, so that's what we're going to do today. We're gonna find some of those characters that meant a whole lot to me a while ago and give them a fresh coat of paint, see if I can pull anything out of the ashes of whatever I left behind. See if there is a phoenix waiting in the wing. If it was not already obvious, I just did not feel like writing a script for this one, but I think it's gonna be more fun. First of all, it's kind of returning to the roots of this channel and this series because the first video that I ever posted was of a similar topic, just with a different set of characters, and it wasn't scripted. It was also really bad, at least audio quality wise, and also I was really not confident recording or talking to the microphone. You know, we're making some improvements hopefully, but I also just kind of wanted to give you the authentic experience of what it would be like if you actually sat down with me and we were looking through these sketchbooks together and I was just telling you what I remembered. So, hopefully this will turn out well, and if you don't end up liking it, I'm sorry, it's too late to change it because I made this in the past. Anyways, without further ado, the characters that we're going to talk about today, I actually don't know exactly what their little code name would be, and I also didn't come up with, like, I'm doing the same thing that I've done the past couple of times where I try to come up with a loose new story concept and idea, and I don't have even like a working title for that. So I'm not really sure what to call these guys, but I will have something on the title, so you'll know what I settled on. I will say that at least on my laptop, all of the old drawings, like the digital stuff, is all collected in a folder that is titled Masquerade. So I think that that's probably the kind of blanket name that I had for the story, which does make sense because it goes into the ideas of like false identities and disguising your true intentions and all that. I don't necessarily like that name. I think it's kind of weird, and it doesn't really work, so probably not keeping that one, but I don't know. I need to start by telling you a little bit about my childhood. When I was just a wee lad, I struggled a lot with the whole socializing thing. I am a very extroverted person, but I have always been a little socially awkward, and there are probably a lot of reasons for this, but at the time, one of the big reasons is that I went to a school, like I'm sure many schools are this way, where a lot of the girls would be friends with girls and a lot of the boys would be friends with boys, and I am non-binary. I did not know that at the time, but I did know that I felt rather uncomfortable trying to fit in with either of those groups. It makes sense now, but at the time, I just thought that maybe I was weird and cringe and bad. This is all to set up that, I got pretty darn excited when in middle school these two very nice and actually somewhat popular girls just randomly seemed to want to be my friend. I still don't really know how or why it happened, but we did end up, like, becoming kind of a trio for a while out of nowhere. So shout out to them. I hope they're not actually watching, though, because that's kind of embarrassing. These two lovely people, unfortunately, had rather bad taste at the time, because they were both obsessed with the show Pretty Little Liars. I know that saying that as a part of this video is already a red flag. I know this. Just walk with me will face this together. They really liked this show at the time, and they talked about it all the time, and they wanted to talk about it with me. And so they really urged me to watch this show. I have a very vivid memory, actually, of in the dark of the night, I logged in to my mom's Netflix account, the actual account, so that I could change my profile on there from a kid's profile to an adult's profile, specifically so that I could watch this show. I should not have watched this show at that age, but I'm sorry, Mom. She does not watch my videos. I explicitly do not want her to watch my videos. I say too many weird, questionable things. And I binge watched this thing specifically so that I could talk with them about it. Because I was devoting so much time to watching this show, I did what I always did back then, and I ended up creating OCs that I thought would fit into this kind of world or followed along the same concept. You do not need to have watched Pretty Little Liars or know much about it in order to understand the rest of this video. Please protect your innocence. I want that for you. As I'm describing the initial concept for these characters and their story and their world, I will tell you all that you need to know about how the thing inspired this, so don't worry. If you know, it might be more obvious, but if you don't know, that's okay too. One of the things that really interested me about this show at the time was the idea that the stakes, the threats, and everything, they had a lot more to do with social repercussions and less to do with actual murder. That did change as the series went on, unfortunately, but I thought it was very interesting that there was the concept of what if instead of just straight up killing you, somebody ruined your life? I was that's really interesting. So what I did is I created a character named Louis Langley, and we're going to hear about this guy a whole lot. But Louis here, if I am going to be 100% honest with myself and with you all right now, he was in a lot of ways a self-insert, which that is not a good way to write a main character a lot of the times, at least if you are a very unself-aware 12-year-old, because you have a hard time writing any level of nuance. Louis Langley was a victim of terrible bullies and his shitty family, and nothing was ever his fault, and he was just randomly, persecuted for all of these things. And all of the good guys also saw that, and that's why throughout the story, they all band together to try and take down this secret bully network that's, just fucking with him all the time. And that's kind of all I really remember about that original thing, or at least everything that's important. I really wish that that was not true, because I know how bare bones that was, but I cannot express to you that it was pretty much just look at this edgy boy and how bad his life is and how mean people are to him, and then look at all of these cool, nice people who are trying to help him. That was pretty much it. It was just wish fulfillment on my end in a lot of ways, if we're gonna be honest. It really wasn't much of a story. These characters were all also basically just the most stock standard, stereotypical high school kind of archetypes that you could possibly find, as written by a middle schooler who went to a private Catholic elementary school. So you can imagine they were not very fleshed out, and they also probably don't represent a single person who actually would go to a high school, or teach at a high school or anything. But you know, one thing I do appreciate about this initial set of characters is that I was trying to create a diverse cast. Now, I don't really think that I pulled it off with any level of elegance or tact because, again, private Catholic elementary school, not exactly a place that fosters a lot of different ideas and types of people, we'll say. So I didn't know what I was writing about, but the fact that I put that in the story and I was trying to do that, I do kind of appreciate that was something that little me was wanting to do. Lewis, from the very start, was always intended to be gay, and then obviously I tried to depict some POC characters. I think part of it was like trying to go for one of those, they're all part of these different cliques, but they're all united under this like one common goal. I thought that that kind of a thing was interesting, and that is a theme that ended up carrying through all of the different like versions of the story. We're gonna get into this, but I kind of had 3 different phases of working on this. I had like the version that was in middle school. There was the version that I tried to kind of bring back for myself in high school with some more updated ideas. And then I sort of poked around with the idea again during the start of college for me. With that one, I just kind of kept the characters and completely changed everything about the story, so actually basing it off of another really bad show that I watched, I have not touched it since. Well, other than for this video. But yeah, the diversity of it was part of the point, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. I'm gonna go ahead and go over all of the characters really fast. Do not worry, it will not take long. We already talked about Lewis. His friends in the kind of story ended up being these 2 guys mainly. One of the guys was this boy named Prescott Knowles. I don't know why his name sounds so old, but that was his name. He's basically just like a nerd who does theater, because I was a nerd who does theater. So, you know, write what you know, I guess. He was nice and a little shy, and I think that that was pretty much his entire character. And then they also had another friend who was basically Prescott, except a girl and Pinkie Pie coded, and her name was Martha O'Reilly. I have no more information about this character because she didn't really have a character. They ended up also becoming friends, I remember, with a foreign exchange student, or at least that's what he was supposed to be, named Kazuki. I will say, though, I remember very vividly, I would always refer to this character, like, in my head as Kazuki, which is not how you pronounce that name, as far as I am aware now, but I didn't know that because I knew nothing about Japan, so I don't know why I thought that I could just write a character that was from there and have no problems. The unmitigated audacity of a middle schooler is something that I almost miss having. I think that his character was kind of like, he was also a nerd, but he was more in that weird nerd category, I think. Like a Fregley from Diary of a Wimpy Kid kind of a character, only we liked him. The only other character that had, like, actual presence in the story and wasn't just kind of there to fill out what I thought would be in a public high school, was the history teacher, Mr. Antonio Lombardi. Very Italian name, I know. It's very impressive. I'm making fun of that, but just spoilers. I do keep that name, so I don't know why I'm... Whatever. He basically existed because I thought it would be interesting to have, you know, actually a presence that it was an authority figure that was also involved in trying to help them. if you are familiar with Pretty Little Liars and you are worried to hear that there was a teacher who was an active participant in this story, and you're taking that to be kind of scary, don't worry, because even as a 12-year-old, I realized that there are certain kinds of relationships that teachers shouldn't be having with their students. Yeah, he really was just there to be nice and supportive and kind of fatherly to Lewis, and people liked him as a teacher, and that was literally it. Now for the cardboard cutout people that are just their archetypes, and actually I don't remember even having really much of a role in the original narrative whatsoever. This is just gonna be really rapid fire. You had Courtney Clark, who was the very stock standard queen bee, two-faced, catty kind of high school blonde lady that you see all the time. You had Faith Snow, who was just kind of that, except she was actually nice. And I think Prescott had a big crush on her. You had Sear Smith, who played baseball and was popular. You had John Perry, who played basketball and was popular. And then you had Beth Rivera, who was basically just the very stereotypical, really involved with student government kind of character. I don't know what I was going for Beth Rivera here, because obviously the name Beth Rivera sounds like maybe Hispanic, but she definitely wasn't, because I never ever drew her in a way that would lend her to that. And also, in the oldest of the drawings that I found, it almost looked like I gave her kind of one of those like sailor uniform kind of collars that you'll see in anime sometimes, or at least I saw it in anime sometimes, and I think that's why I did that. I don't know if she was ever supposed to be Japanese also, but regardless, I don't know why she would be wearing that type of a uniform in an American high school, but I don't know what was up with that character, but she didn't have a personality or things that she did. I don't think she ever even really showed up in like 90% of the old drawings, so I can't tell you more about this person. Speaking of the old drawings, if you're noticing that there is probably not as much content than I have shown previously for other videos like this, it's not necessarily that I don't have it or I couldn't find it. It's just that a lot of it has content about it that is pretty sensitive. As I kind of said, Lewis is a character who experienced a lot of bad things happening to him from other people, and it wasn't just bullying. His family was very toxic and abusive. Unfortunately, a lot of it was reflecting some of my own experiences at the time, but I also was handling topics that I didn't have any personal experience with, at least at the time, so not only do I just not kind of want to delve too deeply into that, because I think it will make the overall video less fun, and that's kind of not what I want to do here. Also, I can look back at that and laugh at how bad it was, but you don't need to see me as a 12-year-old not understand how to write about traumatic events, you know? We just don't need that. I think that's okay to not put that in there. I want you to know that is what I was doing. I was absolutely butchering these topics. I was absolutely not nailing it. 0% nailing it. But we can leave it at that. I don't have to show you how bad I was fumbling. Moving on to how it started to develop in high school, I didn't like the original story anymore because A, it felt really easy to solve because it was literally like this homophobic bullying campaign against this one guy, and the second that they found out who it was, it's kind of over. Unlike with the show Pretty Little Liars, where a lot of the reason that they don't seek help from the authorities or something, or why they don't kind of speak out about this is because they have so many skeletons in their closet that if they were to expose this person or dig too deep or not play along or whatever, then they are at extreme risk of some very serious social and in some cases even legal repercussions. That was not the case with Lewis at all, because he was just gay. I don't actually think that wanting to stay in the closet when you're already getting bullied for being gay is really the same thing as not wanting to go to jail for shoplifting or your boyfriend finding out that you cheated on him, you know? This is where that complete lack of flaws to Lewis or like any responsibility for his actions or the things that are happening in his life kind of poses a little bit of an issue for the concept I was working on. Oh yeah, also it was legitimately a plot point that one of the reason that like Lewis didn't have a lot of friends is because he was new to the school and his family like moved around a lot, and so he could have just moved. Like the way that I set it up initially was that it was specifically someone at that school that was doing it to him, and I severely doubt that they were going to move also to follow him and continue this campaign. So it just doesn't make any sense that this was like an issue at all to the extent that it was. So the new thing that I wanted to do with these characters is I wanted to make the threat that they were facing a little bit more threatening, giving everybody more stakes in what was happening, making it harder to escape, that sort of thing. And also just making all of the characters have more of an active role in what was happening and not just kind of being there to feel bad for Lewis. This is the point where some new inspiration kind of came into my life, that being, oh my god, what's it called? Welcome to the Game. That's it. Watching Markiplier play Welcome to the Game, which was about, like, the dark web or something. I kind of liked this, like, really weird dark web kind of a concept, and what I did was I had this anonymous group of malevolent sorts of people who wanted to basically just target a bunch of very vulnerable and more or less mentally unstable teens at these high schools across America, and the goal was to basically just like ruin their lives to the point where they just kind of snap and do things that a lot of people unfortunately end up doing in American high schools. And I'll leave it there because once again, while I definitely did handle them with a little bit more gravity, I still was not very good at writing about these very sensitive topics, so we're not gonna get much into it past that. However, I will say, as a concept, that's a lot more haunting, a lot more, unfortunately, kind of grounded in reality, and definitely was thematically more interesting. It seemed like I was actually trying to say something and make some kind of a commentary. I was also just a better writer at this point, still not nearly as on the level that I am now, but I realized that all of the characters should probably have a little bit more of a stake in the story beyond, you know, just feeling bad for one guy. So I made it so all of the characters in some way had some kind of dirty laundry that ended up on this, like, gossip chat room site thing, and so then they all had to kind of get together and work together to try and stop it all as a group, and that was kind of how the story went. While looking back, I can still identify that these characters were pretty bare bones. The fact that they all had flaws and things that they were trying to, like, keep from getting out really, really fleshed them out. Because of the new setup, I actually had to think of goals for all of these characters that they were trying to get to that this, like, weird site could potentially keep them from. For example, John, he was cheating on a bunch of his tests, And, you know, he was worried that the evidence would get out, because if the evidence got out, he was probably going to get kicked off of his team. And he was gunning for, like, a basketball scholarship for college, and he was pretty good, like, on track for that. So that would kind of screw up his whole future, and he was really worried that that was going to come out. I never wrote that, you know, that was a thing that he wanted to do or that he was striving towards. And from that point, he also took on, like, a way more determined and driven kind of personality, where he's really, like, focused on this thing, and he's a very hard worker. He just took on this one shortcut, and he regrets it a lot, and now he's, like, really regretting it. And that just wasn't a thing or a part of his character before. So in adding in that they all have stakes, I also had to therefore make these characters more of characters. Funny how that works. I also wanted to try and move away from just doing their archetypes. I know that I took Courtney in particular a little bit more of the Pacifica from Gravity Falls kind of route, where a lot of that meanness and vainness and generally negative traits, a lot of it comes from an insecurity born of an unstable and unloving family. And that was also part of her thing, is that she had a lot of, like, unhealthy coping mechanisms. That was something that she wanted to keep private. She was also figuring out that maybe she was bisexual, and she was worried about that coming out too, because she wasn't ready to come out, heh. In addition to kind of fleshing out at least some of the previous characters, I also ended up adding some new characters, 3 to be exact. Unfortunately, none of them came with really any tangible personality, which is a bummer, because, you know, I just talked about how I was trying to do better with that and how I was doing better with that, and then I made the same exact mistakes again. But we'll go over them anyway, because they do carry over into the final product that I'm going to be talking about later. So first off, I added in Rebecca Perry, who is the sister of John. I don't remember her doing a lot. I also don't remember if they were always twins or always were meant to be twins. However, that is how I remember them being. So I'm just gonna assume that that was always the intention, but it's entirely possible that it wasn't. I dressed her like a very stereotypical, like, Disney show kind of thing, because she was supposed to be, like, the artistic one. I think Faith was originally supposed to be, quote, the artistic one, but I, like, never did anything with her. So I just made another one instead of further adapting the one that I already had. And then I did not adapt this person at all, and I didn't really do anything with her anyway. So I don't really know what the point of all of that was. I think it was more just because having a person who was, like, a part of John's family and could, like, voice the disappointment of them in him, or, like, put the pressure on. I think that that was kind of why I wanted that character to add in that dynamic, but I mostly just didn't really do anything with her. She was all conceptual. Speaking of all conceptual, I also ended up adding this character named Damien Bello. And yes, if you're looking at the screen, I am aware that the color scheme that I gave to him makes him look like a carrot, and I do not know why I did that, but I did rectify this eventually. He came into the story because I wanted to have, like, a character who seems really shy and really, like, nice and gentle, but has, like, a lot of things behind the scenes that is, like, really not great about them. I think that he was supposed to be kind of like a frequent flyer of the dark web, and he would just look at a bunch of really screwed up stuff, / maybe participate in some of the bullying that was happening to other people. He might have been a twist villain at some point, if I'm remembering correctly, but that went out the window very quickly. And then I ended up completely changing his character entirely to be a different one. Like, I changed his name and everything. By the way, if I'm remembering correctly, his name was supposed to be, like, a stupid joke because he was gonna turn out to be, like, a twist villain or something. I literally named him basically Demon Below is basically what his name was supposed to be, so like under the surface he was this awful person. I also think at this time, no joke, I wrote a love interest for Lewis, and I named this guy, no joke, Linkin Park. That was his name. I was so unserious. Anyway, the guy that Damien ended up being rewritten to was named Sam Sires, and I had him be kind of the grumpy, spoiled, and entitled son of the principal of the school. Speaking of the principal of the school, we have Principal Morgan Sires. Principal Morgan didn't really have a personality or concept beyond he is the dad of the character that I made. He did end up taking on a lot of different roles as time went on. Like, in some versions he was like really, really nice, but it was kind of a facade where secretly he was actually in on the weird dark web stuff. I also went back and forth a lot about whether or not he was like a really strict parent or if he was more of a forgiving or permissive parent. I do know that consistently Mom was not in the picture, and he did end up having kind of a flirty romantic thing with Mr. Lombardi. I do remember that kind of became how they got into it, because Lombardi started to want to investigate what this weird chat room was, because he overheard his students talk about it, and he cares about his students, and then it exposed him for kind of having an affair with his, boss, which is probably an HR violation. So that's how they got involved with the story in, like, its last iteration at this, like, phase, I guess. That last phase, or the next phase, whatever you want to say, I'm not going to talk about a lot because there's not a lot to talk about. I didn't really change the characters very much, and I did completely change the story, but I didn't write a whole lot about it. I haven't really mentioned this because it wasn't as big of a deal as me just, like, really butchering a bunch of handling of sensitive topics, but I was not good at writing mysteries, which is not great when you're trying to write a story that is all about mysteries. You know, I was writing clues to an answer that I did not have, which is to say that the clues weren't actually clues, and they were just, like, weird, spooky details that were probably not gonna mean anything. So I pivoted to the concept of what if there is something that is forcing all of these people to work together that has nothing to do with a mystery that I am no longer at all interested in. And I went alien invasion. So now the external force that is mysterious and strange and unknowable is actually aliens, and they have caused an apocalypse, and they attacked their school, and they're the only ones that survived, and now they have to survive together. That is as much as I did. Didn't really end up ever coming back to this until now. However, I did want to work off of that concept that I came up with in college, not only because I had an idea immediately when I was looking back at this of how to adapt that alien concept while really leaning into making it into more of a horror story. Also, the designs that I came up with to, like, refresh all of these already, I mostly stuck to those because they were pretty good aside from a couple of instances, and I will talk about that when we get there. But yeah, that means we are on to the new stuff. How exciting! First things first, let's just go over the basic framework for that new story idea. I will be very upfront that I did not put too terribly much, like, thought or work into this, and I have an excuse because I'm working on a lot of other stuff right now, and I'm writing a lot of other stuff, so I didn't want to have to really dig into this, just for the sake of this, like, fun little, you know, extracurricular thing. However, I did come up with kind of a very interesting horror premise, at least in my opinion. There is a lot of representation out in the world, especially in the horror sphere, of, you know, rage viruses, or otherwise some kind of a external force that makes you kind of go crazy violent. And while that is definitely scary, I personally find it to be a little bit more disturbing when we're dealing with things that, rather than making you feel really, really angry and violent and evil, it instead makes you feel really, really happy or really, really joyful. This is the time where I'm gonna do some Starkid propaganda. I rewatched and then have been listening to the soundtrack of The Guy That Didn't Like Musicals a lot. So that is the thing that I wanted to kind of lean into, is like an alien hive mind that you basically have to die to be a part of it. However, it gives you, like, you know, this sense of belonging and a sense of community, and it's so good and beautiful and positive. I'm not going to get more into that because I want you to go and watch this thing if you haven't watched it yet, and I also don't want to spoil anything for you, and while you're at it, you can just watch all of the things that Starkid's ever made, because they're all pretty good. Black Friday was okay. But yeah, that's kind of the direction that I was going. This is indeed because I wanted to sort of create an allegory for my own high school experience, because again, I went to a private Catholic institution, and being a person in that environment that was very different from everybody else, pretty much across the board, in a lot of different ways, both, like, you know, economic class-wise, and also being as queer as I happen to be, and also not being religious, it was very difficult being in that setting, and I think that there is something to be said about, like, I saw so often how harmful people being forced into this belief system in this community when they really didn't want to be a part of it. They had to kind of tamp down, and even I felt pressured to kind of tamp down who I was as a person in order to embrace what was posed as being such this, like, a good thing. And it's like, how could it be a good thing if I have to completely, like, get rid of everything that makes me me to be a part of this? Also, standard caveat of, this was my experience with this religious experience. I know that that's not everybody's. If you have had positive experiences with religion, if you still have positive experiences with religion, that is awesome. I am so glad that you have found something that brings meaning and purpose to your life, and if it is the thing that pushes you to be a better, happier person and a kinder, more generous person, then that is so fucking cool, and I am not going to take away from that at all. I'm just saying, that is definitely kind of what I was going for, but in more of like a supernatural alien horror story premise. So yeah, there is this alien parasite brainworm thing that once it gets into your brain, it'll start, like, eating away at it and replacing your brain with it. It kind of would operate somewhat similarly to the Nurax worm from Plague Inc. Weird reference there maybe, but it's kind of that. And once it gets to a certain point, you kind of become part of this hive mind that worships the worm as a god, basically, called Izathu. I kind of wanted it to sound a little, like, Lovecraftian. It basically makes you feel, like, very happy and joyful, almost like a manic joy. You know, you're in this euphoric state, and all you want to do is, you know, let this worm eat away at your insides, and also seek out new hosts for it to go to once you are no longer a suitable host anymore. Too Long Didn't Listen, brain-eating worm cult is taking over the country. Taking over the world, in fact. Our protagonists, our characters that we are going to be focusing on, are kind of having one of those Left 4 Dead 2 situations where for some reason they are immune to to these worms. These worms cannot infect them. Their bodies are not suitable hosts. I think that it's probably going to be very Left 4 Dead 2 adjacent in the sense that it's genetic. That's kind of why I wanted to focus more on there being like family members that are in this together. I literally made 2 of the characters brothers for that very reason. So it's gonna be a situation where they go to school one day and slowly throughout the week, every single other person in the school is going to become infected by these things. And they are going to find out quickly that they're the only other ones that aren't involved with this and are still normal. Don't get too comfortable, though, because the joy of having a large cast is it's easy to find characters to kill off. On a real note, these guys can't get infected by the worms, but that actually makes them a target even more because the worms see them as a threat. They are immune to their influence and therefore have the potential to fight them, and so they're basically going to be constantly under threat of being killed by the infected, and so they're going to have to go into hiding. They're going to have to learn how to survive on their own. And it's gonna be a whole thing. And they're also kind of going to be seeking out other people that are also immune and trying to solve the mystery of like how this happened, how to fix it, if there even is a way to fix it. Together, and that's basically the story. Also a lot of stuff about like them trying to make sure that they can get in contact with their family, potentially. Hopefully they all also inherited whatever trait protects them from the worms and whatever. And it's gonna be a lot of that. Now that we have that established, let's talk about how I've updated these characters. We're gonna go over first who is ostensibly the new main character, and that is, a character who was formerly known as Prescott Knowles, who I have now renamed and reworked into a character called Patrick Smith. I changed his name, partially because he now sounds like he could be a child that was born in this century, which is pretty cool, but also, the last name Smith is something that he now shares with his older brother, Seer. I will get more into how that dynamic works in a second, but basically I'm keeping the idea that he is this big old nerd. I'm really leaning into that archetype of like the shy nerd for him. I actually ended up keeping a lot of those basic archetypes for all of them because I think it's fun and also kind of leans into the theming of like a bunch of different type of people all trying to come together towards this common goal and setting their differences aside and all that. The only difference here is that I'm just trying to really make sure they have depth below that and really going into thinking about their intentions. Them fulfilling archetypes isn't the problem, it's just that they were only archetypes that was the issue. So yeah, on the surface, Patrick kind of really is just a big nerd, you know? He does all of the nerdy things. He does like the decathlons, he's involved with the chess team, he does tech stuff for like the theater productions that the school puts on, which is how he makes friends with a lot of the other people here, but we'll get into that later when I talk about those friends. He's very hardworking in all of his academic pursuits, and it is mostly because he feels like he needs to kind of live up to the expectations of his overachiever older brother. The only problem is that he isn't really very sporty, unlike his brother, so he feels like he's really falling behind. He's also not nearly as sociable as his older brother. And while this has never actually made, you know, his older brother have any less respect for him, it does make him feel pretty insecure and almost a little jealous, so there is that underlying tension there that I think would be very interesting to explore. And speaking of interesting to explore, I think that he, as a character from the roster that I have right now, has the most potential for a lot of change and learning, because he's at this place where he's not very confident in himself and he doesn't think he's very capable, but when put to the test in this extreme situation, I think that he could really blossom and learn a lot about himself and learn about just how capable he happens to be. So that's why I think focusing on him as the main character is probably kind of the best way to go about this. So that's why Lewis has kind of been sadly demoted. But don't worry, he's still here. Went very basic with the actual character design. He looks like a nerd because he is a nerd. I will note that I decided to have him be blonde. He actually didn't used to be blonde. He used to have completely white hair. It's bad enough that Seer was very clearly something that I recycled a lot of things from for Andrew. I can't also have a white-haired boy. It's just, I can't do that. I have to try something different. So he is blonde like Seer now. Speaking of Seer, I'll go ahead and talk about him next. I actually kept him pretty much the same as well, design-wise and also personality-wise. He is just kind of like the very standard overachieving student. He's a baseball star. He's top of his class. Everyone likes him too. He's very popular and he's very friendly and personable. He just never seems to stop because he's just so busy on like building success for the future. The place that I wanted to add in a little bit more depth and nuance for him is I specifically wanted him to be kind of the gifted child that's completely burnt out kind of thing, where like on the outside he is trying really hard and he is trying to, you know, go on this path of like going to college and getting a really good career that'll make his parents proud and everything. But right now he does not know what he really wants to do with his life. He wants to start a band or at least like, you know, play independently or something, you know. He wants to travel. He wants to actually like learn about himself because he feels like he hasn't really gotten the chance to develop his personal side because he's been so busy with all of this school stuff. So obviously when he is suddenly not having to worry about school anymore because apocalypse is happening actively, that kind of gives him an opportunity to really, you know, be himself more than he's ever been able to be. And I think that that's just kind of a more interesting direction to take this character and a more interesting thing to explore with him. The only other thing that I kind of want to touch on here is that he is bi. He kind of was always bi, I just never really did anything with it, and I still don't know that I'm going to do much with it in terms of, like, you know, him developing a romance with any of the other characters. I do think that romance and having crushes and all of that is still kind of a thing. It was definitely a very important thing for a very long time, because it's a teen drama kind of thing, so obviously that whole thing is important. I'm not as invested in the romantic lives of a bunch of fictional teenagers anymore, because I am no longer a teenager myself. However, I do still think that, you know, that is an important thing to consider about these characters. I just don't know if that's something that I'm necessarily going to touch on with him specifically. On that note, I guess I'll just move into Lewis, particularly because I know that I want to have him have a big ol' crush on Seer, and that I think is actually something that's been part of the story for a while. It's never been something that Seer ever reciprocated, and part of it has to do with the fact that Seer is a senior, and I think Lewis has pretty much always been a sophomore, and is also, like, around the same age as his little brother, so that does make it a little weird, I think, for him. But anyway, changes to Lewis. I changed his color scheme a little bit, but I mostly just kept the same kind of design. In terms of personality, I wanted the, like, edgy boy thing to be still in play, but rather than it being played very, very seriously and you as the audience supposed to be taking it very, very seriously, I want to play it a little bit more lighthearted. I definitely do think he still had some things that he has every right to be upset about. I am going to go with a version of the story where he was initially with abusive parents who lost custody of him, and it was instead awarded to his uncle, who is a veterinarian and is very nice. So while he definitely does have reasons to be edgy, his life is a lot better now, and a lot of that edgy, like, tortured persona is something that is put on. I think that he tries really hard to be kind of rebellious and mysterious and dark and brooding. He plays the drums and he listens to music and he doesn't care about school and da-da-da-da-da, but it's like all kind of an act. And it's an act that a lot of people don't exactly buy because it's like very transparently put on. And I even think it would be really funny if he had a dynamic with his uncle where like he tries to constantly rebel against his uncle, but his uncle is so kind and supportive that it doesn't ever work. Like, it's not a rebellion because he's like, that's great. And he's like, shit, why can't you just be mad at me? I think that would be a really funny dynamic. And yeah, basically, I want him to be kind of superficial and overly edgy, but it's, like, on purpose now, and I'm writing it to be, like, I'm being self-aware about it, is basically what's happening. I don't intend for him to be anything remotely in the area of a self-insert anymore, but I do still love him, and he's very special to me. It's probably why I drew him so much in a lot of concept art. But yeah, let's move on to the next character. Character formerly known as Martha O'Reilly, now is known as Monica O'Reilly. The first major change to her is that I wanted to try to make a character that I have not made before, and that is a biracial ginger. That is a type of person that exists in the real world that I just haven't ever really represented before, so I wanted to try that out for the sake of this. I also just think that it worked for the new type of character that I was trying to make here. I wanted her to, rather than fulfill kind of that bubbly, adorkable kind of archetype, I wanted to make her a little bit more practical and grounded in reality because I just thought that it would make her more functional for the narrative where, you know, it's survival of an apocalypse kind of situation. So I thought that maybe she could fulfill that kind of like activism sort of archetype. Like, she's big into environmentalism. She like has learned a lot about eco-friendly things and is into foraging. I also just think that she has very like strong convictions about like social justice things, and that's influenced by her background. I imagine that her dad has Irish heritage, hence her last name, whereas her mother is Black, and both of her parents have like very much instilled in her the idea that like she needs to take the world on by the reins and get out there and make it a better place and everything. While the activism archetype is definitely the framework that I was working off of, it's not the entirety of her personality because that would be annoying. I still wanted her to feel very, like, outgoing, not necessarily, like, bubbly or adorkable like before, but definitely, you know, very fun to be around. I imagine that she's a theater kid. She's very big in theater. That's how she met Patrick and is friends with him. And I also imagine that she's very into fashion. She likes to do a lot of thrifting and that sort of thing, and I also wanted her clothes to, like, look more practical while still being really cutesy, and I also wanted to keep more neutral and earthy tones to kind of lend to the whole, like, tree hugger thing almost. And I hope that that comes across. I think she really turned out really cute. I think that I really like this new design concept and just character concept in general, because I did not care about her before, but now I feel like I actually have things to write about her, and I imagine that she'd be like really, really useful to the whole group. So that's Monica. Gonna stick with this friend group for right now, and we're gonna talk about Kazuki Hashimoto. I imagine that he is also a nerd, probably, definitely still a little bit in the awkward, weird nerd category. Maybe he's part of the chess team. He tries really hard to relate to people, but he's, like, maybe just not super good at relating to other people. I think that I maybe would write him with some kind of neurodivergence in mind. I'm not really sure what, and I will not make any definitive statements on what that means at the moment, but That's kind of the angle that I'm gonna go for. He's also notably not a foreign exchange student anymore. I just decided that he's probably just a Japanese immigrant, like his family all immigrated from there. I think that that just makes it far less complicated. I also think that that creates some hope that he will be able to be reunited with his family potentially, and not that they're just in a different country, like halfway across the world, and then maybe they're dead and he'll never see them again. That seems a little extra bleak, and I didn't want to go that hard for, at least for this character in particular. I also decided that he's going to be the only freshman in the group. He probably got in with all of the other people because he's also on the chess team, and so that's kind of how he got in the friend group. And he is definitely new to town and new to the school, but I imagine that he tries really hard to make friends, even though he's a little socially awkward. Which would definitely cause a lot of extra conflict when it comes to the fact that now there's an apocalypse starting, so that would probably put a whole damper on your friendship activities and endeavors. It's kind of harder to fit into a new environment when the environment completely changes just when you started to get used to it. So that's definitely going to be like a ongoing conflict for this character. Other than that, I didn't change too terribly much about its concept or design, because it was fine the way that it was, I guess. To round off the friend group, we have, who was formerly known as Faith Snow, is now known as Faith Shetty. Something very interesting about Faith when I was looking back at her stuff is that I did often give her a little bit of a darker skin tone. I think she was supposed to be a person of color. I just didn't really commit to that, and I decided to commit to that now. I thought that just some of her features already kind of lended her towards maybe being a person with an Indian family, so that's what I went with for this. Other than literally just changing her skin tone, a lot of her design just stayed exactly the same as it did from the version that I did when I was in college, because I liked it a lot. She kind of falls into the, like, sensitive, artistic, kind of reserved gal. She's kind of modest, and she kind of keeps to herself. Patrick notably still has a big old crush on her. The only major change, and you know what, I don't even know that I can call it a change because I didn't really write anything from her ever. I have like negative notes about this girl, but I decided that I wanted her to be a trans character. I haven't really explored trans identity in a character so young at this point. A lot of the characters that I am exploring those narratives with have been all older people, already adults, and that's fine and dandy and everything, but I think that that kind of narrative can be just as interesting, if not more interesting, coming from a younger person. So I think that that may or may not cause some conflicts with her family. I just picture them to be a little bit more conservative leaning. I did think that maybe she was staying with her grandma because her grandma was actually like more chill with all of that, or at the very least she was maybe a little bit more tolerant, maybe not fully accepting, but she loves her grandkid and wants the best for her, and if that means having her hair be longer and dressing a different way and having a different name, she's okay with that, and is trying to learn to be more accepting and more understanding of everything. Just a narrative that I haven't really explored very much with any characters, and I thought that, that this could be an opportunity. I also think that it would be interesting to explore that from like a romantic perspective, because obviously someone of that age starting a transition and everything would probably be a little bit insecure when it comes to romance, and I think that it would be pretty cool and validating for Patrick to love her anyway and not see her any differently, and that's just kind of a cute thing that I thought about. I thought it would be cute. I don't know. Again, I did not write any of this very thoroughly. A lot of this is still very conceptual, but that is the direction that I would want to take this character. So that is Faith. We are now on to the twins, John and Rebecca Perry, and I also decided that Rebecca seems like the type of person where she would just go by Becca, so it's John and Becca now. Part of that is to do with the fact that in my brain, Becca just feels kind of like NB coded, and maybe that's just because I'm NB pilled and everything. But I just thought that that would add a little bit more of an interesting dynamic to everything. For clarification, she goes by she, they pronouns. As in terms of like personality and vibes, I didn't do too terribly much to change John because he was one of the only characters that actually got a significant amount of development already, and so I pretty much just kept him the same. Meanwhile, Becca, I did try to actually give a real personality. When I redesigned her in college, I moved more in a direction of like skater girl, cool guy kind of thing. I thought I'd probably just keep that. That way they do still fill out some kind of an archetype rather than being just another artsy one. I do think that in my brain, Becca is the kind of person that does want to like do a lot of art and is into art and maybe even wanted to do art for college. I wanted to kind of, again, have another sort of character archetype, and I think that her whole thing is being a free spirit and being very like not caring about fitting in or worrying about trends and everything, which obviously makes her so much cooler according to everybody else. So that's kind of what I was doing with them. I like how both of them turned out. I really did. I just stuck to the designs that I had for them in college, and then I called it a day because I thought that they worked for both of the characters and the new things that I had with them, so that's John and Becca. Courtney is gonna be a really quick discussion because I basically just kept her story pretty much exactly the same, except that I toned back on some of the edgy stuff, and I made her not mean girl. She's just like a little social media obsessed kind of. And then her design, I kept basically exactly the same as I did in the latest redesign, so I would like to just say, well, I did a real good job on her the first time, so there's not much change, but like, I think that partially I was just lazy, and I didn't want to come up with something very different for her, which is a bummer. I did, however, kind of want to flesh out the idea that I had of her where she was bisexual. She had only ever dated guys, she only ever had crush on guys, and then she was in a class with Beth. And they don't get along, and they, like, hate each other, but she, like, feels so strongly, and she doesn't really know why she gets so upset that this person doesn't care about her. It's kind of a situation like, everyone loves me, and this one person doesn't love me. Why doesn't she love me? And over time, the more that they're, like, forced to interact with each other, it starts to dawn on Courtney that maybe it's because she has a big old crush. A big old crush on her. I hope that this satisfies all of you that complain that I don't write about sapphic relationships enough. Also, I do. You're just clearly not looking in those places. They're right there. Look at that one. Ooh, another one. They're right there. Yeah, I really don't have much more to say about her. I guess I still am kind of on the fence if I want it to be a situation where it's a bi-awakening or she's been a lesbian this whole time and her past relationships haven't worked out very well because she's a lesbian, but she didn't really understand that about herself yet, either because of family pressure or just because of societal pressure in general. But yeah, I guess naturally we should move on to Beth. No longer Beth Rivera, now is Beth Yoon. I decided that I wanted her to have Korean heritage. I feel like I kind of drew her very often to be Asian coded, and so I was like, why not just commit to that? I think that she might be like a first generation person, so because of that, I think that that would kind of influence maybe why she's so dead focused on being this overachiever. Her parents would have really high expectations for her and, you know, are really pushing her to not waste the opportunity that they sacrificed so much to give to her. I kept her design pretty similar to the way that I drew her in the latest redesign that I did. The only main difference is that I did want to kind of focus on shapes more in general. I was definitely wanting to change up their silhouettes because I found that because all of them had just these long skinny legs, they all had pretty similar silhouettes, even with very different hair. So I was trying to push like body shapes, and also like with her hair, I wanted it to be a lot more angular, because I also just thought that it fit this very regimented and serious sort of character. I imagine that she's still student council president, and she's still like really, really serious about getting good grades and everything. However, I think that kind of the direction that I want to go with her is that she's just terrified of failure, and she kind of loathes people, for example, like Courtney, that don't actually like take things as seriously, because she's a little jealous that they don't have those heighty expectations on them, and people are happy with her as long as they are skirting by, and that's where maybe that kind of resentment between them comes from at the start. But as time goes on, maybe they both learn to be more accepting of each other and themselves, and then they kiss. I think that, oddly enough, ever since I thought about Beth's, like, romantic proclivities, she has been a lesbian. I don't know that I really thought about that much when she first was a concept, because I don't think I thought about her at all. But I do remember that when I was reworking some of the things for, like, the initial alien invasion idea, she was a lesbian. I don't know that she always ended up with Courtney. But now she will, because I think that's a fun little thing. We are finally to the last of the students, and that's, of course, Sam. He's now Sam Morgan and not Sam Sires, because I decided that I just liked Morgan as a last name for both of them better. But anyway, Sam Morgan has not changed pretty much at all from the final, like, redesigned version and reimagined version of him. He is kind of entitled and kind of doesn't care about school as much. He's just kind of tired of education. He feels like he shouldn't have to try. He hates, like, that he can't just do whatever he wants. To develop him a little bit more, I decided to take on the challenge of writing a type of character that I would absolutely despise in real life. Like, there is absolutely nothing endearing about this. I wanted him to fulfill the kind of role of being a super pessimistic doomer person. That type of guy where it's like, why even bother caring about anything? Because we're all gonna die one day, and nothing that you do as an individual is ever going to change how bad the government is and all of this other stuff. The thing that makes him not so annoying to me is that it's more of a facade. It's harder to care, it's harder to admit that you are vulnerable, and he's a person that struggles with vulnerability. I think part of it is that he has a kind of a strained relationship with his father, which we'll get to that. I even think that it's something that would carry over into his academics. Like, he doesn't care about academics, and he says he doesn't care about academics, but deep down, he's probably pretty embarrassed that he's not very good at this stuff. I think that it's less that he's, like, not smart or not intelligent, and maybe he has a learning disability that he's not willing to kind of admit to, and or that his father kind of fails to recognize. Over time, even though he starts off being pretty antagonistic to everybody, I think he will kind of let down his guard, as there's no point in keeping up this facade anymore, and then, you know, they get to know the real Sam, and it's beautiful. I kept his design exactly the same way that I did with the last redesign, though. I'm not really good at coming up with straight coded character outfits for masculine leading characters. I've just never been good at it. But I thought that one worked out really well, so I just decided not to touch it, because if I touched it, I might have messed something up. That's Sam. We'll go ahead and talk about his dad next. Principal Morgan. Now, Principal Irvin Morgan, because Irvin was a cool name that I found, and I wanted an excuse to use it. As I said before, he did not have really a clearly defined role within the story, or, you know, role in his son's life. I think that I wanted to go more of he's very strict and firm to Sam when I was redesigning it the last time, but I think I want to kind of go a little bit deeper into that. I think I said this already a while ago. I've been yapping for a while. I think I said a while ago that the mom wasn't in the picture. In my brain, she was not a good person. Maybe not necessarily a bad mom, which is something that would create a lot of conflict, I think, between Irvin and his son, because he did not want to stay married to this woman, but this person wasn't bad to his kid, and so they have a very contentious shared custody kind of thing. It'll be full custody when the apocalypse happens, but you know. I think Irvin feels like the type of person where he would take the lack of success on the part of his son as kind of a personal failing and a reflection on how well he's doing as a parent. So I imagine that he tries really, really hard to make sure that he's setting him on the right path, but that often results in him being a little too hard on this kid, and maybe he doesn't understand him as person to person as he should. You know, the apocalypse is a perfect time to really get to know people. Also, as far as his design goes, I was going for army vibes. I will admit his hair was majestic before I changed it. I just felt like this maybe suited the character better, because, you know, the idea is he's kind of a militant dad, so, you know, making him look like he could be in the military. Maybe he is in the military, I didn't really decide. But what I did, as you all have pointed out to me from my teaser images, is that I just made Omni-Man if he was black, which I didn't mean to do that, and I didn't even really have Omni-Man on the brain, because I was doing this well before I watched Invincible recently, which, by the way, I have not, like, physically gagged at that show in a while. But I did. And if you know what sequence made me do that, you get 10 points. On to his beautiful husbando, who, according to you all, I made look like either Baby No Money or Jay Schlatt. I can't follow you on those ones as much. I think that the facial hair kind of is reminiscent of a Baby No Money, but like not that much, and when you have the full color and also his body shape, that is not Baby No Money at all. Similarly, I do think that maybe the body shape is closer to Jay Schlatt, but that's not what his face looks like. That's not what his facial hair looks like. That's not what his facial features look like that. I looked up a picture because I was like, does Jay Schlatt look differently than I remember him? And I looked it up and I'm like, no, I was dead on. That looks nothing like him. I don't know what you guys are on, but enough of you were saying it, so I guess that there has to be some resemblance. All I'll say is that if I was drawing the infant without money or Jay Schlatt, that is not how I would be drawing them. Just throwing that out there. Anyways, in terms of his actual character and his story, I think that I'm just gonna keep him that kind of fun world history teacher who loves his students and wants to protect them when the apocalypse happens kind of concept that I had already been following through on. I gave him a doctorate, that's new. I also think that for the sake of this, I would want to further explore maybe the relationship between him and Principal Morgan. In previous versions of the story, it was really just a sexual affair, if I'm gonna be honest. That was kind of how it was before, but I think it would be more interesting to really look into what their bond would be like. Irvin is this very serious kind of straight-laced dude, and Antonio is more goofy and silly, and I think that that always makes for a really fun relationship dynamic. I think that they've always kind of had a thing for each other, but they've never really been able to act on it because, you know, they're professionals, they're at work, they are in a situation where that would be probably an HR violation, so they can't really do that. But now the apocalypse has happened and kind of all bets are off, let's be honest. Yeah, I'm very normal about them. I've been very normal about them. Very, very normal, not weird at all. And the design, I did make him a little chubbier than I have previously, just again because I want to make everybody look a little bit different in terms of their body shape. Yep, that's him. And that's everybody, actually, yeah. I did make a couple charts of, like, the initial sorts of relationships that were happening and dynamics between all of the different characters, and I also made just a basic kind of tile thing with their names, pronouns, ages, grades, and any flags that they would fall under. That stuff is a little bit more subject to change as I continue working with these characters. If I continue working with those characters, I don't know that I have a whole lot to say in terms of, like, whether or not I'd actually stick with this. I cannot overstate how much I have put on my plate. Bars. I've really been overworking myself, if I'm gonna be really candid. Do not feel bad for me, it is all my fault. In other words, though, I don't want to put another project on my plate, and I don't know how exactly jazzed about this idea I am right now to commit to being like, I would do this in the future. But it's not entirely out of the realm of possibility, and when thinking on that possibility, I know that I probably would make it probably a short comic. A pretty snappy one that doesn't, you know, take chapters and chapters and chapters and chapters and chapters and chapters and chapters. This would be kind of a graphic novel sized thing in my brain. I say that now, but who knows. Genre of it, definitely horror. And as far as the style goes, I'd probably want it to feel a little less refined. If that makes any sense. Like, I would want it to look a little grittier. I think that lends itself really well to horror, and I think that having maybe a chunkier, maybe a little bit more messy inking style for the panels would just work really well. Most of the color palette, I'm wanting it to feel kind of muted and more cool-toned. I even kind of thought about the idea of scrapping, like, the colors that I have created for the characters already, like the color schemes, and using a gradient map for everything. I have been really wanting to use gradient maps more and more because I have a lot of fun with them, and I was definitely experimenting for a lot of just the little concept arts that I was doing with the characters for funsies. I do know, though, that I want most of the comic to be sad and gray without a, you know, better way to put it, but the infected people, every time they show up, they are done in very bright, very warm colors to provide, like, a really significant contrast. Almost inspired by that one Amazing World of Gumball episode. I think it's called The Joy. That is genuinely one of my favorite episodes of that show because it's so creepy and weird and kind of haunting, and I just really adore that the horror comes from literal, like, rainbow goo. So that's definitely something I would want to lean into. That's really all I've got to say about all of these guys. I had a lot of fun revisiting these characters. It's not very often that I allow myself to so heavily indulge in these sorts of archetypes. I try really hard to avoid just doing stuff like that, but You know, I think that kind of what I'm going for with the story would just not be the same without it. Throughout the entirety that I worked on these characters, them having these very specific archetypes was very central to their ideas, their characters, and everything, so it would feel wrong to try and take that away from them. I guess, you know, let me know if you'd be interested in seeing more of these guys. I know that you all are still waiting on some more updated information about the Freak Show and everything, and trust me, I am still working with those characters. They are not gone. Again, I just have a lot on my plate right now. I really appreciate, especially the love on like videos like this, because they are so personal. You know, I'm showing you my old art and these characters that used to mean so much to me. It is just still very funny to me how much these characters matter to me, despite the fact that I like just did not write them at all. But yeah, thank you for watching, and obviously thank you to all of my channel members. They've probably been scrolling on by for a while now. They really just do go above and beyond to support me and this channel, and it helps out a lot, so I appreciate them so much. I hope that this was fun, and I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day or evening or whatever. You know, I don't know when you're watching this, but I do know that I would like you to stay hydrated, stay woke, and most importantly, remember that you matter. Bye-bye! Bye! I'm being infected by the parasitic worms, oh no. Oh, there's a mourning dove on my roof. Hello! Hi! He's so cute. I love you.